Hi, it's Carol Ricard, and welcome to the special recording of 60 Seconds to Less Stress. This is actually an encore presentation of the workshop I did a couple weeks ago, so that Joanne had it to send out and share with everybody. So sorry to have missed you, but glad you are getting a chance to watch this. So I made a promise, actually 3 promises to everybody. One, that it really is possible to do something about stress and have less stress in 60 seconds. 2, this won't be a boring workshop. And 3, by the time you get done, you'll actually have tools that you could start putting into practice right away. So I usually start my workshops with the SMART audience test, and that is, answer the question, do you already know if too much stress is bad for your health? And normally in a workshop, everybody raises their hand, so I'm sure you did too. So I'm not going to teach you anything new because I think we're all smart enough. What I am going to do is find a way to get you to take what you know and put it into practice. So at this point, I usually ask for volunteers in the audience who's been stressed out so they can take a bottle of soda and just shake it up. So if you feel like doing that, you got a bottle of soda laying around, go ahead and shake it up. Otherwise, I'm just going to be shaking up this one right here. All right. And I want to put in much pressure into it as I can. And we'll come back to this a little bit later. To get started, I got a question for you. 2 birds sitting on a wire. One decides to fly away. How many are left? Now, before you give me your answer, let me give you the right answer. 2. But in a workshop, I actually was the person that raised my hand for 1 because I thought 1 was the answer. The correct answer is 2 because deciding and doing are 2 different things. Just because we decide something doesn't mean that we do it, which is why I love this little riddle and I stole it, because I realize there's lots that I have decided in my life, but not that I really did it. So congratulations, because you're actually here listening to this workshop. Now, 2 birds sitting on a wire, knowing and doing are 2 different things also. And so this system only works when you use it. Now, this is my first what I call word tool, and that is the word do. So when we do, we're actually directing opportunity. All right? Got more of those. So why should you listen to me? Well, actually, for the last 23 years, I've been teaching stress and wellness skills in hospital-based programs. And I found that people are actually smart enough, right? That most people know what it is they need to do. Like, too much stress is bad for your health. So what I did is my approach is a little different. I like to use images and analogies and word art to take what you already know and get you to think about it a little differently using the right side of your brain. Now, the reason that you can actually put it into practice is because the whole brain is working on the same thing. Or as I like to say, you get to move knowledge into action, right? So I've also taken the work that I've done for the past 23 years and put that into, quite a few books. And then I write a weekly magazine article for Esperanza Magazine, and you can find it at hopetocope.com/blog. But most importantly, whatever I tell you is I'm going to live what I teach. So anything that I share with you today is actually what I use in my own life to help deal with my stress. So my mission, quite honestly, is to get you to join me and become a 60-second stress buster. All right? So I usually have people raise their hands if they have a tool or a toolbox or a tool drawer at home, right? And I'm sure you do. Well, just like we have tools for things, I believe that we have to have tools for life. All right? Now, one of the first tools I like to share with people is a card. And if you were in my live workshop and you happen to have the high card, you actually would have won a prize by now. But the point of this is that we don't always get to choose the cards that we're dealt. And as you get to learn a little bit more about me, you'll realize that I had some cards that I never would have asked for, but nonetheless, I was given. So the first tool I like to share is called simpletruths.com. And if you go to motivational videos, there's a great video called Finish Strong. It's about 3 minutes long, and it's for free. And if you just need a pick-me-up, this is a great video to watch. And one of its main points is that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters, which is one of my favorite quotes. So have you ever taken a knife and tried to use it as a screwdriver? Be honest. Pretty much usually everybody in my workshops, will say they have. So just in case you're one of those people who says, oh, worked pretty good. This is the question I have for you. I put together a hammock with a knife and one using a screwdriver. The question I have for you is, which one do you want to lay in? And hopefully you said this one, because having the right tool for the job can make all the difference in the world. But about duct tape, how many different things have you used duct tape for? Right? Well, guess what? I know there's that book, 1001 Ways. Here's a few of my uses. Actually, at work one time my glasses broke. I used it the morning of the workshop as a lint brush. And then from a radiator hose when I was living in Kansas and going to college, it busted on the way to Kansas City. And thank goodness I had some radiator hose. And it had to hold me a little while because I actually didn't have the money to replace it. And then one other thing I want to show you. I know you think you're looking at a weed trimmer, but the truth of the matter is that you're looking at my lawnmower for 2 years. You see, I lived in a townhouse in North Brunswick, and when I moved to Hunterdon County, I actually didn't have a mower, right? But because I had about an acre, I knew I wanted one of these babies. I knew I wanted a John Deere. So I saved up and I used my weed trimmer as my lawnmower for about a year. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it kind of did the job. And so I think of these things as survival tools, right? There's something that we grab at that can be a quick fix. The problem with a quick fix is that it's usually a temporary fix. And just like we have survival tools for things, we can actually have survival tools for life. And I'd like to share a couple examples of what I mean by that. So this is a picture of my father, and believe it or not, he's wearing a patch because when he was 8 years old and he was playing Cowboys and Indians, the little boy that he was playing with actually had a loaded .22. And so my father ended up being shot. In fact, my uncle did surgery to remove the bullet from his brain because back in those days it was lead. And so interestingly enough, my grandmother's got called into school. At least the story I'm told is that my grandmother got called into school when my father started high school and was said, they might want to put him in a vocational program. And of course, my grandmother didn't listen to him. And my father went on to become a doctor. So I like sharing that story because don't ever let somebody else's opinion become your reality or even your child's reality, because that's all it is an opinion. But here is my survival tool. And I'm not talking about, nowadays. I'm actually talking about I was 14 years old. And what had happened was a weekend before Christmas in 1976, my father and mother had gone down to Los Angeles. So my dad's nurse was taking care of us and babysitting. And I overheard a conversation she was having with my brother-in-law. And I basically heard something that wasn't meant for my ears, and that was that my father was dying from cancer. And so immediately I kind of started stealing alcohol from my parents, and we had a lot of it because we'd had a bar and a restaurant that we had to sell, and at least now I knew why we had to sell it. But I didn't tell anybody because in my family, nobody told me. And we were the kind of family that didn't talk about things. But I was really, really lucky because this switch actually is another one of my survival tools. And what it is that the morning that my mother told me that my father had passed away, I remember thinking to myself, I'm just going to go on as if he was never there. And that was my way of surviving, the tremendous loss. And again, it kind of, in the long run, it went on to hurt me. I was very lucky, though, because the end of the year in June, there was a basketball assembly, and I actually won an award at that assembly for Most Improved Player. I also happened to be at that assembly intoxicated, and I remember walking down the bleachers in the gym kind of saying, don't stumble, don't stumble, don't stumble. But it was a turning point because I thought, wow, maybe I could be good at this. And so instead of drinking, I ended up just shoot for hours on end, shooting baskets. And then there's one more example, and that's Oprah. For years she battled with her weight, and it wasn't until she realized that she used food as her survival tool that she really had some success. And all of these things, the downside of survival tools is the fact that they go on to become a problem. All right? Now, for me, personally and professionally, it's really been about swapping out my survival tools and other people's survival tools for what I call life tools, and that's really the healthy alternative. Now, you gotta just beware, because these can become survival tools. Substance use, shopping or spending, eating food. It could be smoking if you're a smoker, avoiding fighting, maybe worrying or complaining. And here's the thing, anything that we use to avoid dealing with something actually becomes a survival tool. We can use things to take a break and kind of distract us, but ultimately we come back to just deal with the problem or the situation. So a survival tool is when we just completely avoid it and do nothing to take care of it. Want you to think about, what tools have you been using? Maybe you do have some healthy tools, which is great. I'm going to give you more. Maybe you've been using some unhealthy survival tools. All right. And in that case, here's a chance to change them out. So there's a couple keys to changing out those tools. And the first one is, you are the one who must decide if what you're doing is working for you. Because if it's not a problem, then don't change it. But you're the only one that can answer that. Stephen Covey has a great quote when it comes to change, and that is, the gate of change can only be opened from the inside. And so here's the thing, I'm going to save you all lots of stress. Think about people in your life that you want to change. Well, give up, because you don't have access to their gate. So you might as well stop trying. All right. Second one is, it's important not to invalidate the old tools. And to me, this is why it's important to be able to share my story, because I don't think we should have shame or guilt over the behaviors that maybe weren't so healthy that got us to survive. That's what they did. And today you get to decide if they continue to serve you, or, if you're serving them. The other thing is to watch out for comfort zones. Now, here's the thing. You got to have two hands free, all right? So don't do this if you're driving and listening to me. Wait till you get pulled over. But what I want you to do is lace your fingers together, all right? So that you actually kind of like, your fingers are all laced and thumbs are on top of each other. Now, whatever thumbs are on top of each other, I want you to reverse it. So this way, you relace your fingers and you got your other thumb on top. Now hold it, but how does that feel? Pretty weird, right? So the thing is, when we try to make a change, we're going to be pushed out of our comfort zone. And I actually stole this exercise from Jack Canfield, the guy that wrote the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. I went to a workshop that he was doing, and I was really fortunate to be able to learn this trick. Now, notice how you've been holding it a little while. It doesn't feel as weird as what it did when you first started, right? So when you try something new, it's going to feel really weird. And you just got to keep persisting until it becomes a new comfort zone. Okay, you can stop. All right. And then the other thing is, don't let fear stop you. All right. So have you ever read the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Because if you haven't, it's a great story for adults. And then there's even a kid's version too, at least teenagers. It's a story about some a maze and cheese and these four little people, and what happens when the cheese is gone, and how some of them respond to change in a healthy, constructive way, and how some of them become paralyzed by the fear and don't respond to change. Now, other thing I need you to do, so you got to have your hands free, is kind of want to touch your thumb and one of your fingers together. All right, doesn't matter which finger. Then hold your hands outside, kind of out in front of you and out to the side of you, and repeat after me. Oh, what the heck? Go for it anyway. Yeah, that's it. Now, that one Jack Canfield taught us too. And he told the story of this woman who ran a nonprofit, and she was at the bank after she'd gone to work out and wanted to go upstairs, but kind of thought, I'm not dressed right. So she was really kind of afraid to go up there because of how she looked. So she ducked into the bathroom, did this, oh, what the heck, go for it anyway. Ended up going upstairs and left with a $10,000 donation for her organization. But if the fear had stopped her, her organization would have been $10,000 less, right? And the reason I think it works so good comes back to your brain, because we're not just using one side of it, we're actually using both of it when we say it, when we sing it, when we touch our fingers together. So it's kind of got both sides of your brain locked into the same message. Now, a little short story, and you might have heard this before. This is actually a worksheet that I do with my patients, and I just kind of animated it here, but the woman who wrote it, her name is Portia Nelson. Chapter 1, I walk down the street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in, I am lost, I'm hopeless. It isn't my fault, it takes forever to find a way out. Oh, forever. Chapter 2 is, I walk down the street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it, I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault, it still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3 is, I walk down the street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in, it's a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4 is, I walk down the street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk, and I walk around it. And chapter 5 is, I walk down another street. Don't you love that? So the question I want you to think about is, do you have any stress holes in your life? Those would be the things that you keep doing over and over and over again that aren't helping you. Now, in order to do something about these stress holes, it requires two things. One, it requires you to become aware of what the habits are. And a habit is to have a behavior internally triggered. So you're just doing it, because you're not even thinking about doing it. You are just doing it. So now, to change a habit, Jack Canfield told a story about NASA. And the truth is, I've tried to figure out if it was real, not real, truth or myth. And so I'm going to tell it to you anyways, and you can decide for yourself. But what he shared was that way back in the early days, NASA wanted to find out how the astronauts would behave when they became disoriented in space. And so what they did is that they created these goggles that they had to wear, and it turned everything completely upside down. And what they found, that the astronauts that wore the goggles, that between day 25 and 30, that those brain images actually adapted. So their brain actually now took the upside down information and was able to process it in a way that they were no longer turned upside down. The astronauts that took them off for a day and then put them back on, they too had to get between 25, 30 days in order for their brains consecutively wearing it, for their brains to adapt and create a new neural pathway. And we know these days that our brains create new neural pathways, right? So while I was doing a little bit of research, I did find that way back in the 30s that there was a professor at the University of Innsbruck who did this. And he took a man and he actually inverted his goggles. And if you Google, inverted goggles, you will find this YouTube video. Now, the problem is it's in German, so you got to be able to read German subtitles. But the black and white video you can actually watch for yourself, because he kind of shows the same thing, that this guy kind of adapts to it. So, raise your hands, or let me ask you, have you owned at least 2 or 3 cars in the family? Now, it doesn't mean you had to own them, but just in the household, whether growing up or your household you have now. I go up to 4, 5 at the most in my workshop. But the point being is, imagine that you had one car that had to last you a lifetime. How well would you take care of that car? Probably pretty good, right? Well, the thing is that you are sitting right now in your one car, and I don't mean the car, I mean your body, because you got one body that has to last you a lifetime. And I want you to think about, how well are you taking care of that? So you're sitting in your one car, your body, and how have you been doing? So the secret to keeping that one car running is actually wellness. And I want to share a definition of wellness with you. And that is, it's an active process of becoming aware of and making choices towards a more successful existence. And the reason I love this is because if you're somebody that's living with an illness, or you know somebody, you can have an illness and wellness at the same time. And by just listening to this very presentation, you are actually becoming aware of and making choices. And only you get to decide what a more successful existence is for you. So I have a girlfriend with lupus, and over the last 25 years, her definition of successful existence has really kind of changed. It went from, working and then being a vice principal, to then having to retire medically, to now really staying out of the hospital, quite honestly. And if she's doing that, she's really happy. So you get to decide what that is. Now, what's the first thing you think of when you hear or see the word stress? We had some good ones come up in my workshop, some that I can't repeat. But I want to give you kind of a definition of what stress really is. And really simply put, it's a response to a change or a situation. All right? Now, the situation or change can be positive or negative. So, for example, my dog, Callie, that's a positive stressor, especially on this day, because I thought she looked so cute, but then I realized I had to give her a bath because she was completely muddy. Kids, work, having a house and a mortgage or an apartment, those are positive stressors. And I got one more I want to share with you too. How about this? This guy won $425 million in the Powerball, right? Now you'll notice he's holding it so you can't see his face, because there's a lot of stress that goes along with winning that much money. But I don't know about you, but I'm willing to try it, right? Then the other thing is that it doesn't have to be a big change or situation. It could even be a small one. So, have you ever left 5 minutes late for work and ended up being 15, 20 minutes late, which made a whole lot more stress for you because you got stuck behind the school buses, right? Now, two important things. The source is the change or the situation, all right? And then the response is what happens when you experience that change or situation. So I want to give you some examples. But before we do, I have another question for you. Has this ever happened to you? Have you been going away on vacation and gone to leave the next day, whether you were flying or driving, and so you go to bed that night, and guess what? You can't sleep, right? Yeah. So we can't stop all of our responses. So sometimes all we can do is really minimize the damage that they do. So, for example, with sleeping, maybe I get 5 hours of sleep instead of 8. But 5 hours of sleep is better than 3 hours of sleep. Oh, and can I tell you what? Do you ever go away on vacation only to come back and need a vacation to recuperate from your vacation? Right? So here is my secret, and I discovered it working at Carrier Foundation, trying to get people back to work. So what I told them to do is start at the end of the week, so that this way they had a weekend so they could be back for 1 or 2 or 3 days, and then have a weekend to recuperate and then be back. So this way you don't lose all the relaxation that your vacation gave you. So if you can do it, it's great. I try to come back on a Thursday. Sometimes I might have to do a Wednesday, but I get 3 days at work, and then I know I'm going to have a break, so I don't kind of lose everything. So the thing about responses is they come in 3 flavors. What I mean by that, there's physical, and this is what your body responds to the situation or the change. Or it's your emotional response to the situation or the change. So it's what you're feeling. And the last thing is your behavior, and that is, what do you do, when you experience that situation or that change? So I want to show you some examples of source and some examples of responses. So you'll see responses are anxiety, muscles, can't sleep, drink, frustrated, eat, avoidance, pain, depression. Source, we got work. It could be paperwork, Work coworkers calling out, the weather, too much to do, home. The source could be husband, wife, kids. And then there's a category in the middle that could be both. Because sometimes, if you have a migraine, that's the thing that stresses you out. But then when you get stressed, or it could be both of those things. Now, you got to be careful, though, because something that starts off kind of simple as a response can become a survival tool. So here's what I mean by that. When I stopped playing basketball, I ended up, my job that I had, I was driving kids around. And so on the way back, I would stop and get a small candy bar. That was my treat for, just dealing with the stress of the day. However, my coworkers knew if I was more stressed because I'd actually bring back more chocolate. And if it was really bad day, I'd bring back one of them really huge chocolate bars. And so what started out as just kind of a response actually started to take off, and it was controlling me, if that makes sense. So let me ask you this. When you get stressed out, do you crave salty foods? Or do you crave sweet foods? Or do you crave both? And I don't know about you, but I'm a both person. Now, here's the thing. We know that when we're under stress, your body goes through physiological changes. And so cortisol is one of the kind of chemicals in our body that's connected to stress. So here's the thing. You may not always be able to stop this craving. It's what you do about it, though, that matters. And so what I've learned is pretzel M&Ms are very addictive because they're both salty and sweet. But I've learned that I can't buy a big bag because I will have and eat the whole thing. So what I do is what I call harm reduction. I'll buy a king size bag knowing that, okay, I'm limiting how much I can kind of do. There's certain things I know. Ice cream is kind of like that. I kind of end up having no self-control. If it's in my house, I eat the whole thing. So I kind of don't set myself up that way, and neither should you. Now, remember I was talking about the cyclones, the migraines, and this is what I mean by stress cyclones. So let's say I'm at work one day and my migraine pops up. So the migraine actually makes my work more stressful. And the more stressful that becomes, the worse the migraine gets, to the point where it kind of feeds back in. And what happens is I've had it get so bad that I've had to go home from work because I was sick to my stomach. And so it just feeds into each other like a cyclone, and it picks up speed. And we have to interrupt the cyclone and start it over. So word tool number 3 is actually we need to be aware, and that is to actively work at recognizing the existence of our stress, the existence of our behaviors, our responses physically. Is it more emotional? Is it more behavioral? The thing about it is that stress can make the symptoms worse. So if you're dealing with an illness, guess what? Your blood pressure is going to go up. Your blood sugars are going to go up. And here's the thing. Your medicine's not going to take care of it. Psychiatrist I worked with said it's the medicine's job to manage the illness, and it's the person's job to manage the situation. So that means that you have to take steps to kind of manage your stress rather than just taking more insulin or just thinking that your blood pressure medicine's going to do the job, because it won't. So, would you agree with me that this bottle that we shook up earlier, when it's not properly handled, will make a mess? I don't know if that's ever happened to you, where you've opened up a bottle and flew all over the place. So here's what we did. You didn't see it, but I actually took and shook up the bottle, right? And the pressure builds up inside that bottle. And I think the same thing happens to people. The difference is that life shakes us up, and then the pressure builds up inside of us. And so 60 seconds to less stress way is quite simply taking action. And you got to do 2 steps. Step 1 is you stop the buildup, right? And then step 2 is you got to release some. Because by just letting these bottles sit here, the pressure doesn't go anywhere. Once it's in there to stay. Which is why food is a survival tool, or alcohol, or even things like that. It doesn't eliminate what's already been built up, because that's just staying there until you release it. And why do most people fail? Well, they fail because they only do step one. So let's say you are having in the middle of an argument, or an argument is started with your spouse or one of your coworkers or one of your bosses, and you say, all right, I'm not going to continue to argue. So you walk away. All right. But if you walk away and don't do anything, then what ends up happening is the next person that crosses your path, it comes out on them usually. So I don't know if you've ever done this, somebody asked you one little question and you almost bit their head off for that one little question. And that's because it came out on the wrong person. So you can't just only stop it. You got to do both steps. You got to stop it by walking away, but then you also have to release some of it once you walk away. So step one is to stop the level from rising or the pressure from building up. I want you to think of a tub, right? And if you don't turn the water off in a tub, it is going to overflow. So step one is turn the water off, turn off the flow. So you stop the level from rising. However, you got to also do the second step, because somebody could always come along behind you and turn the water back on. And if it was my brother, we'd do that just to get me in trouble. And so the next thing you know, the tub's overflowing. But if I do step number 2 and I release it so the level drops, which is he's active, here's what I'm doing. I'm turning the water off, but I'm also actually having to unplug the drain. So I let some out. So even if my brother came by and turned the water back on again, I've actually let it out. So it's not going to hit overflow right away. Okay. So I want to kind of explain the difference between what I call passive and active. Passive is something that is calming. All right. But it doesn't really require a lot of energy or muscle. So let me put all these things up here, and you'll see that these are all things that don't necessarily require muscle or energy, but they can be calming in a sense. Counting to 10, taking a time out, even walking away, taking a hot shower or bath, or just breathing exercises. And then you're going to see that the release is all stuff that requires energy and muscles. So you can talk, walk, or write, and you'll see listening to music becomes active when you start singing with it or dance with it, or cleaning or exercise. And if you're the kind of person that exercises, then you know that when you don't exercise, you really feel different, right? And the other thing about meditating is it doesn't mean making your brain stop. It just means focusing on a particular thing. And in the case, it really is breathing. So the quick 3, if you can think of no others, are walk, talk, or write. So you could take a walk, but if you can't take a walk, then you can just talk, and I've had plenty of empty chair conversations with my boss who I could say what I wanted to say without the worry of getting fired. And then there's what I call write, or I call it dumping. And here's what dumping is. It's when you write, but you don't read what you just wrote. Instead, you just destroy it. Because by writing it, it comes out your hand onto the paper and you release it. But the minute you read it, what happens is you end up reloading it. So let me ask you this. Has this ever happened to you? You went shopping for soda or seltzer and you were really careful to get it home and you got it into the refrigerator, and then sometime the next week you weren't really paying attention and you ended up with a mess on your hands because you opened it up and it sprayed all over the place, right? Well, that's because, can you tell just by looking at something? And usually I got 2 bottles, one that's a clear, like a 7-Up, which we shook up just as much as the other one, but you can't tell the pressures inside there. And you can't always tell by looking at people either. You have to, though, just be prepared to use these tools daily and act as if, just be prepared for it to be shook up, all right? So I want to give you some more 60-second solutions. First one is a mental foxhole, and this is actually what Harry Truman used in the White House when he was the president. And what it is that you think of the most peaceful, relaxing place that is for you, all right? And then what you want to do is close your eyes, and for 1 minute, you want to imagine that you were there. But you also want to include as many senses as possible. So what are you feeling? What are you tasting? What are you hearing? What are you seeing? A good one is, I use the beach as a good example. I had a patient who that was the calmest place for her. She just loved being there, but she didn't drive. So we did was taught her how to go there in her mind. So she would be on the beach. She could feel the sand underneath her feet. She could feel the sun on her face. You know what? She could hear the waves. She could almost taste like a little bit of the salt in the air. And you do that for just 60 seconds, set a timer, and that's it. All right? And it's just kind of taking a break in the middle of chaos just to give yourself a little bit of a refresher. Now, what about President Kennedy? What do you think he used? And you can't say Marilyn Monroe either. All right? I know your age if you were laughing. All right? But what he used was a rocker, and he used that for his back. But the truth is that the range of motion that a rocker takes us and makes our brain move is very relaxing. And anybody that's rocked a baby to sleep knows that, right? And here's the thing. If you've seen an autistic child or an adult, there's a good chance that you might find them rocking. And that's because it's very self-soothing. All right, so do 60 seconds of rocking. There could be word tool number 4 is to finish. And here's how you use this tool. When you are about to start a task, especially one that you have a habit of not finishing or completing, which then makes just more stress, you actually say this word to yourself. So one of the things that I used to do was laundry. I love washing it, I love folding it, but then I would leave it right on top of the dryer. So what I started with this tool was I would say, Carol, finish. Focus in now instead of stopping halfway. And when you say that out loud to yourself, again, because it's connecting both sides of your brain, it's pretty amazing, that you start to kind of finish stuff. And that's how we create new habits, right? Now, here's my most favorite, though, for avoiding. If it doesn't involve you, don't get involved. So this could actually take 0 seconds, because how much of your stress belongs to other people, or is what other people have pulled you in to their, situations or their current problems, right? And another really important one is don't think for other people. My girlfriend Hope used to think a lot for other people. Well, they're too busy. I don't want to ask. I said, would you stop thinking for other people? Just ask. Ask them if they're too busy. If they are, they'll tell you, right? And then word tool for ask is that's the only way you acquire self-knowledge. And here's another really important one. Don't take it personal. If somebody's dumping their load or they're overflowing on you, it's not about you, it's them. So don't take it personal. And this way it won't stress you out. And another one of my favorites, it is what it is. And if you can practice that and not make it bigger or worse in your mind, then guess what? You're going to go a long ways to eliminating a lot of stress. You could do a 60-second load of laundry too. So in order to do a load of stress laundry, what you need is stress away laundry soap. And you'll see it's guaranteed to lighten any day. Use at least one time daily. Separate it into piles if it's too large for one load. And you may need to do multiple loads. So here's the thing. Everything on here can work. There are some passive ones and there's some active ones, right? I think more tend to be active than not. But here's the trick. Not everything works the same for everybody. All right. So you got to try. And if you're trying something new, you got to try it 6 times. The one I left off of here for me was untangling jewelry. For some reason, for me, that is so relaxing. But I know for most other people, it's horribly stressful. All right. Now, coming along, because you really do have a power tool. And that power tool happens to be your mind. And what I say is our mind is a magnificent instrument needing direction. So if you don't give it direction, it's going to go whichever direction it wants. And that's usually in the direction we don't want to go, right? So here's the first thing that I actually believe is original that I didn't steal from anybody else. So S equals the situation, T equals your thoughts, and R equals your response. So S plus T equals your response. The situation plus your thoughts about it equal your response. So I want to give you an example. both Hurricane Irene and Hurricane Sandy, actually where I live, we lost power for 2 weeks. I live in the corner of Hunterdon County. Now, here's the thing. I had a neighbor, and of course the hurricane is a situation you can't control, right? The thoughts were, I can't believe it's taking them so long to turn the power back on. And her response was anger, right? Well, here's me, and same situation. My thoughts were, it could be worse. And my response was gratitude. And it could have been worse. The tree that came down could have come down on my house. Or worse yet, I could have had no trees, but I could have experienced the type of losses that other people had down, at the shore. And if I had been down at the shore, my probably could have been worse was, somebody could have been killed. But nobody was. So I can be grateful about that. Now, the only thing different in us is the thoughts. And here you can see it compared. So what you think is going to make a difference in how you feel. So I'll give you another example. The old negative way, my dog Callie, who you saw earlier, has seizures. And driving her home from the animal hospital back a couple years ago for the second time in 6 months, I caught myself thinking, what am I going to do? And I was feeling completely overwhelmed. And then I caught myself being overwhelmed in what I was thinking. And so I kind of changed the thought. And I said, well, I'm doing everything I can. And things are slowly getting better. And immediately I could feel calm and peaceful rather than the overwhelm. So here's the trick about our thoughts. We can't stop our thoughts. So you're never going to stop the negative thoughts from being there. All right. I want to help you understand what you can do about them, though. So have you ever watched the TV, right? Whether it's ESPN or CNN or anything like that, even the shopping networks. So, on the TV, you've got this picture going on, right? And then all of a sudden, across the bottom, there goes this print. It says breaking news. You get to choose what you pay attention to and where you're focusing your attention right now. And so as you read that, your attention is down at the bottom, not focusing on the big TV, right? And that's kind of how we change our thoughts. The negative thoughts are still going to be there in the background. The question is, can you focus on a positive one right down along the bottom? So it's what you put your attention to that makes all the difference in the world. Does that make a little bit of sense? And here's a great replacement thought. If you don't know what to think this and fill in the sentence. It could be worse. It could be, and finish how it could be worse. Come up with a way that whatever the change or the situation is could be worse. And let that be your positive that you hold on to in your mind. So, just in wrapping things up, kind of what we've looked at is that survival tools are not good stress tools. That actually having the right tool for the job will make all the difference in the world. That you really can have less stress in 60 seconds, right? And the first step is to stop it. Second step is to release it. And lastly, that it only works if you do it. So if you don't do it, it isn't going to work. So here's the thing. This is my email, Carol@WellUniversity. And if you have a stressor or you need, some ideas, send me an email. I'm always glad to be able to help out. I just ask that in the subject line, you put 60 seconds so that I'll know that it was part of this workshop. All right. And I just want to say thanks for listening. And I hope that you were able to get some really good tools or some ideas. And again, I didn't teach you really anything new, did I? I'm just hoping that I took what you knew and now got your whole brain working together so you can take action to less stress.